So what is this talk about? What a strange title. But you know, I've seen some other videos with this title and it just made me laugh, you know? Because I had a friend, the late great Chris Daly, the artist, that he would imitate the most humble person of the whole world who claimed to talk directly to God. Because he was so humble, like he was the humblest of all servants. And so he would imitate that person and say,
Do you know, I am the most humble person in the whole world.
"Are you really, Carleon?"
Indeed, and I can talk directly to God, you know.
That's amazing. Now, how do you do that?
Do you know, it goes something like this, you know. You must first have an intermediary.
But you just said you talk directly to God. That means no intermediary.
Do you know, I give you the instructions for the beginner.
I see. So you're the expert and I'm the beginner?
Then of course, you know, I'm the most humble in this world.
We are back, and I would like to actually share with you my own visionary understanding of what happens when you talk to God. So, as you may know, I have been looking at the physics of unification, and I've come to the conclusion that all of the physical forces, strong and weak nuclear forces, charge, gravity, and all those things, I left one out, but all of those forces can be unified if you have a model of the universe that starts with the void, which is a quiescent, infinitely turbulent, zero viscosity and zero density fluid. That's sort of like a, you know, if you were a scientist on Earth, you would say it is an infinite superconductor, you know, and it would have no friction, completely frictionless. So that kind of a fluid is very unstable, and it would start to flow even if the smallest of mosquitoes sneezed. And so then the whole thing would just immediately become very chaotic, and it would start moving and forming patterns and stuff. And so it turns out that in our universe, all we have is our instruments. And when we look at a light photon, it's actually a vortex. And when we look at the smallest elementary mass particle, like an electron that has inertia, that's a vortex that's been trapped into a circular flow. And so I have other videos that talk about that. And I think that this isn't a new idea. I've seen so many pictures of toroids through the years that I'm sure someone out there has probably realized that the universe is a fluid. And from a chemical engineering point of view, I like to look at it as a fluid because then I have a basis of which to think about it. So, because we all know what a fluid is, right? So, now that we know that, and we know that our bodies are sort of composed of, well, the electrons in our body, you know, they have their own flow. They have a toroid flow that pulls in the ether, and it flows in a specific spiral pattern that goes in a circle and goes forever and ever, and it pulls ether in, and then there's an equal and opposite flow of ether outward. And as well, whenever there's any kind of a chemical exchange in the body from one molecule to another, there's a exchange of light. Because when there's, you know, like when, say, ATP is made, there's exchanges of light photons in that process. You know, every time you have reactant A plus B going to C or something like that, there's a light photon exchange. That's an energy quanta that's exchanged. And so we're filled with light photons as well. So we have all these light photons flitting around in our bodies, as well as the mass toroids. Now, there's a bigger pattern. These are the small patterns that add on to the bigger patterns. But there's a bigger pattern, and I'll just simplify it by saying that we have since our body is more long than it is wide, and due to our spinal column and our heart, we have a certain pattern around our body that many of us are familiar with. It's sort of like a toroid. It goes around our body, you know, like that, and it kind of has different layers, and there's probably another toroid around just the heart and another one just around the brain. But let's just say there's a big single toroid that sort of like is an average toroid. And it's an electromagnetic field. And the way we explain it as scientists on Earth level is we say that our instruments pick up the electromagnetic pulse of the heart as it beats. Because, you know, when the heart beats, you've got blood flowing up and blood flowing down and blood flowing this way and that way. And blood is charged. And when you have charged fluid moving in a coherent direction, meaning not just all chaotic, but in a certain net direction, you're going to get an electromagnetic field that it emanates. So the E and the B fields are related. They're one and the same thing. They're just different ways of expressing it. And so we have this E field, electromagnetic field, and this magnetic field around our heart, E and B of X, Y, Z, T. X, Y, Z, T. X, Y, Z, of course, is the space around our body in this grid, so you can locate that. And so at any one point, you have an E field and a B field, whatever, that characterize that magnetic field. So that's sort of the starting point. So now that we know that the human has an electromagnetic field around it, well, we're just going to draw that, and of course we know it's a toroid, and what happens is, if you look at that as maybe a photon going in a circle, because that's what a toroid is, it's a spiral movement of ether going in a circle. We've got ether being pulled into it, because remember, in our light photon, it sucks ether. The ether is sucked in and it goes into it like that, and then it slowly starts going, you know, as the photon goes over here, it starts to suck things in, and then they go in. So here's the photon and it's going in. Woo! The speed of light, of course. And then a little fairy dust in the ether is slowly sucked in, and it follows the vortex path of the photon and gets sucked in, and then it just follows the photon. Okay? And some particles might be temporarily sucked towards it, but then the photon goes away too fast, and then they sort of, you know, maybe picked up a little bit of energy as the photon went up, but they didn't go into the photon. So that's what I call the inward flow of ether. And this same photon, if you twist it in a circle to where it sort of sucks itself in and makes your toroid, which I've already talked about in some previous videos, and will continue to talk about in future ones, you have the inward flow. And basically, if this were your toroid, let's draw it like this, a little bit 3D, okay? So your ether flowing in, if this was a fairy dust that got sucked into the toroid, it would kind of go in like that, and kind of get into smaller and smaller circles. Continue to go around, and it's still spiraling, but it's going around this way now. And the fairy dust, of course, is not really anything permanent. It's just a twist of the ether that happens to be having an inertial quantity around it. So I call that fairy dust. You could call it the particles that pop into and out of existence in our zero-point field. So those particles, which are not really particles, they're called fairy dust, go in, and you can follow. I have to label them fairy dust because we have to have some way to follow the streamlines of the ether. And so fairy dust is a convenient zero mass entity that, as the mass of any wiggle in space approaches zero, or as its inertia approaches zero, and as that happens, this entity would follow this path and go forever and ever. So that was a very beginner's way to explain that, and I hope to be able to explain that better another time. But we're looking at the structure of the ether as it flows into the toroid that kind of is our body, that general pattern, okay? The bigger pattern if you were to look at it from the outside. And it's sucking in the ether. Here's the example of ether sucking in, and that's the pattern it makes. So it's sucking in the ether that spirals around our body, not only this way, but this way. You know, it comes out of the paper, it's spiraling, and then goes back in. Comes out, spiraling, and it goes back in. Okay, that is the inward flow. And then there's an outward flow of ether that's equal and opposite, and it goes this way. Out, ether, and that's the ether that causes the universe to expand. And the balancing of the two can be thought of as our chakra that we live in. And so let's now kind of symbolize it even further. So here's me with my toroid, and the earth is part of our picture. The earth is part of our picture. So not only is the ether flowing into our body if we were just floating out in space, but in order to survive, we also need the earth holding us down so that we can have ether flowing into our body and into the earth, because the earth is just as important as we are. Us and the earth are balanced by the heavens. And so we have ether flowing into the earth, and then we also have the heavens sucking out, or having equal and opposite flow of ether going up to the sky. And I just draw it like this because where it is in the middle, where they balance each other, that balancing point is ideally in the fourth chakra. For our planet now, that's where it should be. You know, like, because you have to love other people in order to survive and exist on Earth. So now, how does this help us understand how to talk to God? Because if the solar system is sort of our sub-God, and then the system above that the solar system is part of, the Milky Way galaxy, is the sun, and all the other planets and solar systems are subsystems of that next bigger God, the galaxy. And then there's a bigger one, whether it's a nebula or whatever our galaxy is part of, that's another one. And they keep going up forever and ever, and that's God. And so in order to talk directly to God, you have to somehow connect the ether that flows into your body from out there. You have to have that ether be connected all the way out, not just to the sun, but to the universe bigger than that, and the universe bigger than that, and the universe bigger than that. And my language needs to be clarified. The system bigger than that, the system bigger than that. And it also has to, as it flows into your body, you have to follow that ether in your imagination to your larger toroidal pattern, and into the electrons within that, and the protons within that. And that same ether flows within those. There's universes within those, and they go smaller and smaller down to infinitely small size. So if we accept the premise that the universe is etheric flow of nested, fractally nested spiral patterns that are full of information, and they're all connected in a harmonic way that's like life. That's what life is. When your body is connected to the heavens and the earth, you are a living being, and you're walking around on the earth. But if your body dies, these two flows separate out, and yes, there will still be ether going into the earth itself, because the earth itself is living, but your body won't be that middle point anymore. And the earth won't be pulling the ether out of your body in a balanced way, in the same way as when you were living, because you no longer have this toroidal pattern here. So that toroidal pattern is removed from the order. But if your toroidal pattern and everything within it is placed in an ordered fashion to where you can, in your mind, follow the etheric flux coming from the heavens, follow it back up through at least the sun, because our mental capacity may not be, I know, I have trouble going beyond the sun, but it's almost like a metaphor. But if you think of it that way, and then you think, okay, the sun and beyond, because once you get up to the level of the sun, you're basically on the right pattern, and in your mind, you've identified the mathematical formula of, the summation from 0 to infinity of all the universes of various sizes, I have to think about my nomenclature, but so you're thinking outwardly you're connecting to the infinite sizes, and it's like, for example, you know how you're connected to the earth, and the earth and the heavens connect through your living body due to. Okay, so the last thing I said before I got cut off, because the battery ran out, was that the earth and you and the heavens are connected. Okay, and there's a toroidal pattern, sort of a toroidal pattern, that emanates from your body and kind of goes around it and spirals around it, and there's actually a real fluid called ether that flows that way. And the flowing itself, that movement of etheric consciousness that flows around your body, is part of your living entity self. So what we want to do is we want to link our etheric flow, which is our consciousness. We want to put our thought consciousness into the flow of our form. What is our form? We don't want to focus on a book or a thought, an angry thought, or a worry. No. We don't want to. We only want to focus on our consciousness as it forms our life force. And that is the ether that flows from the heavens into our body. And not only does it go into the earth, of which we are one, but it goes into our body. And if this is my arm, okay, my hair, okay, and on my heart, so the ether also flows into my body. Not only does it go through it to the earth, but it stays around and flows into the mass particles in spiral forms, and goes around forever and ever into each mass form that's in my body. And as the blood flows down and up and emanates an E field and a B field around my body that looks like this toroid, because I'm an electric system, this toroid is part of me. Some people say that it's your soul, but I don't want to get into technicalities there. I'm talking about how I want to place my consciousness in the etheric flow, sort of like a summation of etheric flows, because like I'm telling you here that it goes into the electrons, and there's also photons in your body every time you have a chemical reaction and you exchange a photon. So those photons are also pulling in ether, and if you have a fairy dust particle in the ether, which is a infinitely small inertial entity in the etheric flow, because it has infinite whorls and twirls, so an infinitely small wiggle that has inertia, that's a fairy dust particle. If you follow its trajectory, it would go into the photon and it would flow in that vortex form. Okay, so that's the inward flow, so it goes through you and in you. So you're putting your consciousness on understanding that etheric flow from the heavens is flowing into your body, and you are thus receiving information from the whole Akashic field, the whole cosmos. How are you receiving information from it? Because the ether that flows in isn't just flowing at a completely inviscid, flat profile of flow. It has wiggles within it that record where it came from. And so those little wiggles of information are all going into your body, through your body to the earth, and staying in your body. And as the blood flows and generates this field, the net flow forms as it interacts with the earth's field. The heavens and the earth interact together with your body, and the blood flowing up and down with this form. It allows you to be one with the earth and the heavens. And when you can mentally attain that state by being aware of this as it's happening, then you're primed to be able to talk to God. And I laugh because, of course, a lot of Christians might say that was blasphemous or whatever, but no, I'm talking about really connecting to Christ consciousness. And so here's how I do it. And this is just my method, okay? Put your concentration in your feet and feel the ether flow from the heavens into your body, through your feet, into the earth. As you raise one arm up, you feel the same equal and opposite flow of the ether flowing from the earth and from your own body. Every cell gives some ether, equal and opposite flow to its own, back up to the heavens to balance it. So that's going up to your hands, out of your hands, up to the universe. So if you have a message to the universe, you lift your hand up and you let the ether that flows out of your hand to the heavens contain that information that's coming right where your heart is, by the way. So if you're thinking a thought and you lift your hand up and you lift it to the heavens and it sucks that ether out, it's going to pick up the wiggles of your thought and it will sense it. So if there was a conscious entity, say in the sun, that felt that, some say Christ lives in the sun, that Christ consciousness is in the sun. It's a subset of the bigger organization of our galaxy, which is a subset of the bigger organization, which is the nebula that we're in, or whatever is bigger than our galaxy, on up to infinity. But I can only think up to about the sun. So that's where I stop, and I kind of envision that Christ consciousness is going through the sun and our whole solar system and beyond. So I'm sending my ether from the earth and my body out with my hand, and I'm taking it in from the heavens, receiving that information and guidance, which goes into my feet and also into my body and into my etheric flow field. And then the other hand is over my heart, which guides my thoughts, which is thinking on Christ consciousness, which to me is non-dualism combined with gratitude. So knowing that everyone out there is me, because it's a fluid and it's all connected, and so if I were to take my consciousness and put it in their body, then I would be them, right? But right now it's right here. This is what I'm allotted, and I'm putting it in my form and my connection to the earth and the heavens. When I do that, I'm sending my own Christ consciousness desire to the universe, and then I'm receiving it back. And so it's a way to jump into the jump rope and be in sync with the universe. And when you're there, because the universe is love, so if you think on Christ consciousness love as you're in this state, it's kind of like you're jumping into the jump rope that two people are turning. They're turning the jump rope, and you jump in, right? And you start jumping with it. You're in sync with them. So you've got your your body / earth, and the heavens. And they're both, okay, so they're both resonating at this love song. And that doesn't sound very technical. I'm getting very metaphorical. So I'm going to now make a clean slate and give my summary of a way to talk to God the way I do it. And then I'll tell you what happened the first time I tried this. So I stand on the earth, place one hand over my heart, one hand up to the heavens. So there's my heart. So one hand up to the heavens as I send the ether of me plus earth, me plus Gaia. So I send that energy up to the heavens, and then that's one, and then I receive energy from the heavens back towards me, and it goes into the earth and into my body where my field is. So that's 2. And then 3, my hand is over my heart, which is where they shall hence meet. As I say aloud, hand on heart, I say aloud, Christ consciousness. So I'm thinking on Christ consciousness as if it was a song that I was evoking in my mind, which elicits connection, non-duality, which means the one God, the one. Yin and yang is one thing that became yin and yang. And in my yin and yang of ether flowing into me and ether flowing out of me, in that separation is a oneness. And in that oneness, which I'll draw a dotted line around infinity, is that non-dual state where I'm you and you're me. And love is what holds us together. And the very flow of energy to cause any chemical reaction in our body or anything to happen is a sort of a bliss. Because when ether flows, that is consciousness and that is bliss. So in the best way I can stumble upon explaining this, that is my exercise. And if I was explaining it to a child, I would say it would be like 2 friends are turning the jump rope and you have to jump in. What are you going to do to jump in? You're going to be in sync with those 2 people. And you're going to jump in and become one with the jump rope that's turning. And that's what we're doing here. We're jumping into our body, putting our consciousness into our body, putting our consciousness into the etheric flux that flows in and out of our body, that makes us who we are, that makes our wings or our toroidal pattern of electromagnetic flow. It makes our blood flow. It makes everything about us be alive. And that, my friend, is putting you into a state where you can not only talk to God, because when you have your hand on your heart and you're sending your information up to God, you're sending God, you're sending to the universe, to God, to your higher self. You're sending gratitude, love, and a strong yearning to do God's will and to receive information back. What do you need to do so that you can do God's will? What do you need to know? What do you need physically? What do you need to receive right now from the universe in order to do God's highest good? Because you're one with God and you're feeling that. There's no way to get around that. So once you realize that you are one with God, then when you do this, it's not like, oh no, I'm giving up myself to be with God. No, because you realize you already are one with God. So there's nothing to lose because you're just becoming yourself. And in doing that, you can then send your deepest yearnings and wishes to God and then ask back to receive the information that you need and to filter it properly to where you know now what you need to do. And then you just wait and you will get information back. You will get answers to your prayers. You will get wisdom, the wisdom that you asked for, and maybe the courage that you need because you asked for it doing this. And now that I've told you how I talk with God and how you might want to do that also. If you have a way that you talk to God, please share it in the comments. And after I did this for the very first time and really got a rush of love and goosebumps, and really realizing that this is a scientific way to put your own consciousness, which is the flowing ether, into who you are by being that as you imagine it with your thoughts and with your feet and your hands and your hand on your heart, and the affirmation of Christ consciousness. You could also chant. That might also even make it more intense, because it would help your body to actually vibrate in that pattern. And I haven't tried that. I'm just kind of learning how to chant. And when I do get goosebumps all over my body. So I want to combine that with this exercise. But the first time I did it, I looked out my window, and the moon was like 3/4 big outside my window. And when I looked there, I knew that that was the sun's light that came to my eyes. So I felt like I was talking directly to the sun, right? Not to God, but to the sun. And I knew that Christ consciousness was in the sun. At least at that moment, I felt that was so. And so I felt like I was talking to Jesus, who was my intermediary, and I was saying, I know you're connected to the entire universe. And by going through you, it's kind of like looking through a telescope. You're going through the telescope in order to see something bigger. And you may not see the whole universe, but you might see part of the universe, which in my case was Jesus. But I knew that Jesus was a telescope to even bigger universe. And then there was bigger and bigger telescopes, metaphorically, of course. So the punchline of the story is, right after I did this exercise, talking to the moon, a big cloud sort of moved over and revealed the back end of what appeared to be as big as an apartment building in the sky, sort of a gray boxy thing. It might have been shaped like that, with a few red lights on it and white and green lights. And it looked like some kind of cargo device or something, like gray metal, had panels and stuff. And it kind of lifted into the cloud, and I thought, that looks like it was a cloaking device. And this anti-gravity craft was a little bit sluggish. And whoever was, in charge of the cloaking device, the fake cloud, it looked very fake. The cloud looked very fake. Like the edges were like mist, It didn't look like a normal cloud. So that cloaking device, that guy was a little bit drunk, and he just went a little bit too fast. Or maybe this guy was drunk and went a little bit too slow. Whatever. But I saw it for a few seconds, and then it went up into the cloud. And I made a whole separate video on that on my ASMR channel, if you care to see that. So look for that if you want to see that. But isn't that interesting that I saw that right after I did the connection to the sun? And it made me think that somebody up there, is feeling my vibe. And they said, let's send her a signal that she'll know she did it right, and that she knows she's onto something, and that method is going to work. And they sent me a UFO, because I hadn't seen a UFO since I was about 12 years old. When I was in Mexico was the last time I saw a UFO, first and last. This was my second sighting, and then about a year later, almost to the same date, I saw another one right outside my window. And I made another video on that. So I'll post that soon. So thank you so much for letting me share with you how the theory of etheric flux applies to talking to God.
Well, you know, Carol, I think you did a nice job. I think you're a smart cookie. Although I see a little bit of a problem with the math, you know.
The math?
Yeah. You got the, you know, the subscript.
What?
The subscript.
That's hard to say without moving your lips.
The subscript. You got it wrong, you know.
I know, that's why I erased it so quickly.
Yeah, that's very good. Very good. So, now, shall I talk to God for you?
Are you going to be my intermediary?
Though, you know, I think, why not let Jasmine do it?
Oh, Jasmine, that's a good idea. Jasmine?
Yes.
Carl Jung said that you might agree to be my intermediary.
Well, what are you talking about?
You know, you can help me talk to God.
You mean by channeling? I don't want to do that today. I'm just not in the mood to channel today. I just don't want to. Please don't make me.
I never make you. It just seems to happen when you're on my own.
Never, no.
I am Meryl, the angel of the Lord, and I am here to tell you, Carol, you need to eat more vegetables. Is that all you have to say? Well, it is a very important lesson. Greens, you need greens.